October 20, 2011, the sky above the city of Sirte, the hometown of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, was no longer the blue of the Mediterranean but clouded with gunpowder smoke and dust from crumbled concrete buildings. Amidst that rubble, a man in his late 60s, his face deformed by blood and mud, was trembling as he retreated deep into a filthy drainage pipe. Just a few months prior, this man was still sitting in gold-plated palaces, protected by an elite female bodyguard unit, and holding the fate of millions of people along with the largest oil reserves in Africa. But now, surrounding him were not loyal servants, but an angry mob of young men with AK rifles in their hands. They did not see in him a great leader or the king of kings of Africa. They only saw a monster cornered into a dead end. When pulled out of the drainage pipe, Gaddafi uttered his final bitter words, "What did I do to you?" That question fell into the void, drowned out by screams demanding blood debt. The death of Gaddafi was not just the end of a human being, it was the collapse of a bizarre ideology, a dynasty built on fear, eccentricity, and billions of dollars from oil. But to understand why a nation that once worshipped him could treat him like this, we must go back in time to 42 years ago, when the name Muammar Gaddafi first made the whole world hold its breath. Muammar Gaddafi was born in a nomadic tent near Sirte in 1942. His parents were poor, illiterate Bedouins but rich in national pride. Gaddafi's childhood was tied to white sand, the harshness of nature, and stories about the heroic resistance of the Libyan people against Italian colonialists. It was this nomadic origin that molded a highly contradictory Gaddafi, simultaneously hating the luxury of the West and longing to assert the supreme position of the Arabs. He joined the army not to seek glory, but to find a tool to change the country's destiny. In 1969, Libya under King Idris I was an old, crumbling nation. Oil had been found, but the profits all flowed into the pockets of foreign corporations and the aristocracy close to the royal family. At dawn on September 1, 1969, while King Idris was receiving medical treatment in Turkey, a group of young officers calling themselves the Free Officers carried out a secret march. They seized the radio station, government buildings, and airports in Tripoli and Benghazi. The coup took place so smoothly that the people initially thought it was a military drill. Until a young, authoritative voice echoed on the radio waves, "O great Libyan people, the era of oppression has ended." Gaddafi was only 27 years old then. With a handsome face and a radiant smile, he appeared as a Che Guevara of the Arab world. He quickly fulfilled bold promises, expelling US and British military bases, nationalizing banks, and especially taking back control of oil. In his first decade, Gaddafi was truly a hero. Oil money began to flow into social welfare funds. Libya suddenly went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to having the highest per capita income in Africa. Poor people who previously lived in tents were now provided with modern apartments. Education and healthcare became completely free. Gaddafi even initiated the Great Man-Made River Project, an engineering marvel bringing fresh water from deep within the Sahara Desert to coastal cities. The Libyan people at that time believed they had truly found a savior. However, history has proven that, when a man holds absolute power without any checks, ideals will sooner or later turn into illusions. Gaddafi was not satisfied with just being a politician. He wanted to be a world-class philosopher. In 1975, he published the first volume of the Green Book. In this book, he rejected all forms of modern democracy, arguing that elections are a deception and parliament is a betrayal of the people. He replaced the government with the Jamahiriya system, also known as the state of the masses. In theory, the people would govern themselves through basic congresses. But in reality, this was a sophisticated charade. Gaddafi declared he held no office, just a brotherly leader, but his every command was the supreme law. From here, Libya entered a bizarre era, a place where people had to memorize the Green Book, a place where public hangings of traitors were broadcast live on television as a deterrent, and a place where the eccentricity of one individual began to become a shackle for an entire nation. By the mid-1970s, Muammar Gaddafi no longer wanted to look in the mirror and see the image of an ordinary military man. He began shedding the stiff military uniform to don brightly colored robes, gold-plated ceremonial dress, and especially the birth of the Jamahiriya doctrine, a term he coined himself, meaning state of the masses. According to the theory of the Green Book, Gaddafi declared Libya the most democratic country in the world because there was no government. He dissolved ministries, replacing them with people's committees and basic people's congresses. He boldly declared to the whole nation, "I am not the president, I have no legal power, I am merely the guide of the revolution." But the reality was a brutal play. Under the guise of guidance, Gaddafi held all the keys, from the oil treasury to the secret police. Anyone who dared to criticize the Green Book or doubt the Jamahiriya system was considered an enemy of the people. Revolutionary committees were established in every neighborhood, school, and workplace. Their task was not administrative management, but ideological surveillance. Thousands of people disappeared into notorious prisons like Abu Salim just for a joke about the leader. Gaddafi's eccentricity began to extend far beyond Libya's borders. Wherever he went, he brought a giant Bedouin tent, pitching it right in the heart of major capitals like Paris, Rome, or New York to receive heads of state. This was how he asserted his desert origins, but inside that tent was extreme luxury. Most notable was the Amazonian Guard, a force consisting of about 40 young, beautiful women, always wearing camouflage uniforms, heavy makeup, and sworn to protect Gaddafi with their lives. They had to maintain their virginity and undergo extremely harsh military training courses. The world saw them as a symbol of weirdness, but to Gaddafi, it was a way for him to prove the women's liberation doctrine in the Green Book, while creating a psychological shield against potential enemies. While the Libyan people lived in fear mixed with a cult of personality, Gaddafi began extending his octopus tentacles globally. He considered himself the savior of national liberation movements, but in the eyes of the West, he was the golden sponsor for terrorism. The 1980s marked extreme tension between Tripoli and Washington. US President Ronald Reagan did not hesitate to call Gaddafi the mad dog of the Middle East. In 1986, after a discotheque bombing in Berlin that killed US military personnel, the US retaliated with Operation El Dorado Canyon, bombing directly into Gaddafi's compound in Tripoli. Gaddafi narrowly escaped death, but this event only increased his hatred for the West. The peak of the confrontation took place on December 21, 1988. Pan Am Flight 103 blew up in the sky over Lockerbie, Scotland, taking the lives of 270 people. International investigations all pointed fingers at Libyan intelligence. The world was shocked. The United Nations imposed strict embargoes on Libya. The country, originally rich from oil, began to fall into a state of goods shortage and hyperinflation. Instead of admitting fault, Gaddafi used this isolation to incite national spirit, turning himself into a victim of imperialism. However, behind closed doors, he began to realize that he could not fight the whole world forever. Entering the 2000s, the world witnessed the most spectacular U-turn in diplomatic history. After seeing Saddam Hussein overthrown in Iraq, Gaddafi feared he would be the next name. He suddenly announced the complete abandonment of his nuclear weapons program, compensated billions of dollars to the victims of the Lockerbie bombing, and invited Western oil corporations back. Gaddafi was welcomed in European palaces like a new fellow traveler. Britain, France, Italy, all rolled out the red carpet for him in exchange for lucrative oil and gas contracts. However, this exact rapprochement with the West inadvertently revealed the rot of the regime. While his son, Saif al-Islam, lived in luxury in London and Paris, Libyan youth in Benghazi and Tripoli still had to face unemployment and oppression. The anger that had been smoldering for 40 years was just waiting for a spark to ignite. In early 2011, a ghost began to haunt the palaces across the Middle East and North Africa, the Arab Spring. The first dominoes fell in Tunisia and Egypt. Gaddafi, in the arrogance of a man who had ruled for 42 years, believed Libya was an exception. He believed that a child of the desert like him was so loved by the people that he was irreplaceable. On February 15, 2011, the arrest of a human rights lawyer in Benghazi became the straw that broke the camel's back. The initial protests, which were small-scale, quickly erupted into a massive wave of outrage. The people no longer chanted the slogans of the Green Book, they burned it. Gaddafi's reaction was not dialogue, but extreme brutality. He appeared on television in a brown robe, waving the book around, his face fiercely yelling, "I will hunt them down inch by inch, home by home, alley by alley. They are just rats injected with poison by Al-Qaeda and the West." This threat was a fatal mistake. It did not frighten the people, but only strengthened their determination that, either Gaddafi dies, or Libya perishes. To NATO's intervention and the historical turning point. When Gaddafi's army with tanks and heavy artillery approached Benghazi to carry out the promise to wipe clean, the world did not stand by and watch. The United Nations Security Council established a no-fly zone. Cruise missiles from the NATO coalition began raining down on Libya's military bases and air defense systems. The situation changed completely. The rebel forces, originally just students, mechanics, and teachers holding guns, now had air support. One by one, cities fell from Gaddafi's grasp. The capital Tripoli fell in August 2011. The great leader, who once hosted world heads of state in his luxurious tent, now had to flee on dusty pickup trucks toward his hometown of Sirte. Sirte, the last city still loyal to Gaddafi, was besieged for weeks. Inside the crumbling walls, Gaddafi lived in extreme paranoia. He moved from house to avoid drones, eating instant noodles and cereal to survive the days, yet still ordered the remaining soldiers to fight to the last drop of blood. At dawn on October 20, 2011, a convoy carrying Gaddafi attempted to break through the siege to flee deep into the Sahara Desert. But they could not escape the all-seeing eyes of NATO. A Predator drone and French fighter jets attacked the convoy. Gaddafi survived the explosion but was wounded in the head and leg. In a panic, he and a few loyal bodyguards crawled into two drainage pipes beneath the highway to hide. Ironically, the man who once called his people rats was now running and hiding in the very dwelling place of that animal. Rebel forces found him. What happened next was a chaotic and horrifying scene recorded by mobile phones. Gaddafi was dragged, beaten, and humiliated. He looked at the young soldiers and asked, "Do you know right from wrong?" There was no answer but the sound of gunfire. A bullet to the head ended the life of the most powerful man in Libya. His body was later put on display in a cold storage facility in Misrata for the public to line up and see, an ending that could not be more tragic and bitter for a desert emperor. Looking back at Muammar Gaddafi's 42 years of rule, history cannot give a simple judgment in black and white. In terms of numbers, Gaddafi turned Libya into the country with the highest Human Development Index, HDI, in Africa. He built massive dams, modern hospitals, and eradicated illiteracy for an entire nation. But the price paid was the complete strangulation of freedom, and a bizarre political system entirely dependent on the will of a single individual. When that individual collapsed, the whole nation collapsed with him. Because Gaddafi never built a sustainable institution, Libya after 2011 fell into an immense power vacuum, leading to prolonged civil war and division. Absolute power is a poison. It makes the person at the helm lose their sense of reality and strips the people of their ability for self-determination. Muammar Gaddafi started as a national liberation hero but ended as a lonely tyrant. His story is an eternal reminder that, no throne is sturdy enough if it is not built on the foundation of the law and respect for human dignity. Under the desert winds blowing across Sirte today, dust and sand may have filled the drainage pipes of the past, but the scars the colonel left on the body of Libya will take many more decades to heal.